Welcome back to TNLP, the newsletter podcast, brought to you by the HazMat Guys. I'm your host, Timmy, back with this week's latest hazmat news. Without further ado, this week we're expanding our reporting to South America, where at least 22 people were injured on Friday after a powerful explosion triggered a major fire at an industrial park housing several chemical firms and other manufacturers south of Buenos Aires, Argentina. A thick column of black and orange smoke rose hundreds of meters into the sky above the municipality of Ezeiza, an area about 40 kilometers from Buenos Aires that includes Argentina's main international airport, as flames lit up the surrounding buildings. Gaston Granados, the town's mayor, told the C5N news channel that the situation was tremendous, noting that the fire and the explosions were occurring in the different industries. At least one of the factories affected, among the 5 reported by the press, was reduced to ashes, local reporters said. The windows of my house and those in the neighborhood exploded. We are evacuating families, added Granados, who lives about 500 meters from the industrial sector known as the Spegazzini Polygon, one of the larger industrial clusters in the southern metropolitan belt. Carlos Santoro, director of the hospital receiving the injured, told the La Nacion Plus television that the number of patients admitted so far stands at 22, though none of them were in a life-threatening condition. He later explained to Infobae that the hospital had received a patient who suffered a heart attack and a pregnant woman struggling with smoke intoxication. She remains in intensive care after being brought in from a nearby neighborhood affected by the explosion. The cause of the emergency remains unknown. Granados said investigators had begun preliminary work to determine the origin of the blast, and that statements from factory workers and CCTV footage would form part of the inquiry. We are trying to control it and put it out, but we still haven't been able to, he said. One of the access motorways to the area was closed as a precaution, leading to significant traffic delays during the evening rush hour. Around 20 fire trucks, police units, and civil defense teams were deployed. The affected industrial park lies near Ezeiza International Airport, the country's most important international air terminal. Airport authorities said operations remained normal, although they were monitoring wind direction and had issued internal safety alerts. The National Civil Aviation Administration said no flights had been diverted. The park includes a range of companies handling hazardous chemical compounds, tire storage facilities, and a document depot operated by Iron Mountain. The latter drew particular attention due to a major fire involving a separate Iron Mountain site in Buenos Aires in 2014, although authorities stressed there was no indication of a link in the present case. These are different companies with different products. There is significant tire stockpiling in several chemical firms. It is a very complex fire, and it will be a long operation, said Fabian Garcia, Civil Defense Director for Buenos Aires Province, speaking to the media in the early hours of Saturday. One logistics company appears to be where the fire began, he added, noting that specialist chemical fire units and foam retardants were being used to contain the flames. Provincial authorities urged nearby residents to take precautions against possible toxic fumes. They advised people to remain indoors with doors and windows shut, turn off air conditioning and fans, and avoid traveling through the affected area. Those encountering smoke were told to move quickly in the opposite direction and cover their nose and mouth with a damp cloth. Environmental officials said air quality monitoring stations had been activated and that water runoff from the site was being assessed for potential chemical contamination. Dozens of videos and images of the blaze and the huge column of smoke flooded social media from multiple angles, while local shelters prepared to receive evacuated families pending further updates from emergency services. Next, we head back stateside, where the hazmat situation in Pinellas Park has been contained. And the fire department says that the shelter notice has been lifted in the area of 62nd Avenue and 53rd Street. Pinellas Park police and firefighters responded to the hazmat situation on Friday night after a large fire reportedly broke out. They located a refrigerated storage container holding industrial peroxide and acetone-based materials. These materials are used in manufacturing and are stored on the company's property in a controlled unit. The container began heating, and it produced a visible plume and odor. Since the container was refrigerated, fire crews were able to bring its temperature down quickly. Dr. Stephen Goldberg, Chief Medical Officer of HealthTrack RX, explained how these containers are used. They're really commonly used, and they're used for sanitization, for bleaching, for manufacturing, for making resin, Goldberg said. When you keep them cool, you keep them calm. But what happened was it seemed there was a bit of a fire. The temperature around them got elevated. That caused them to vaporize and get into the air. The vapor plume and odor in the area dispersed naturally after crews controlled the situation. Nobody has contacted emergency services regarding any medical concerns. One firefighter was hospitalized but later released. Residents living in the area were advised to stay indoors for several hours. Dr. Goldberg applauded the call to issue shelter-in-place orders, knowing what was at risk. He said, most commonly there is irritation to the body, irritation to the nose, to the throat, to the lungs. If someone has underlying lung disease and they have exposure, that could be a problem to their breathing. The Pinellas Park Fire Department says that anyone who believes they were directly exposed or is experiencing symptoms should contact their healthcare provider. A specialized contractor is cleaning the affected area. Pinellas Park firefighters, Lealman Fire Rescue, St. Petersburg Fire Rescue, Largo Fire Rescue, and the Pinellas County HazMat team responded to the incident. Updates will be made to this story as more information is released, and we'll continue to report on this story should we get further developments. Wrapping up this week, a massive incident out of Oklahoma there's no doubt you've already heard about. Hundreds of people were evacuated from a city in Oklahoma, and others were told to shelter in place after a tanker truck that was leaking in a hotel parking lot spewed a plume of anhydrous ammonia gas, authorities said Thursday. The gas release happened shortly before 10 p.m. on Wednesday. People in the immediate area were in respiratory distress, and at least 36 people were taken to a local hospital. City officials said at a news conference at least 500 to 600 people were in a shelter by Thursday morning, authorities said. Several nursing homes were evacuated, and schools were closed for the day. Authorities said the air quality was being monitored and that the tanker truck was no longer spewing gas. Anhydrous ammonia is used as a fertilizer to help provide nitrogen for corn and wheat plants. If a person touches it when it is in gas or liquid form, they could be burned. Local law enforcement had warned residents that the air in the area was unsafe to breathe. Southwest Oklahoma State University also canceled classes at its campus in the town Thursday. Last week, an anhydrous ammonia leak caused by an explosion at a plant north of Yazoo City, Mississippi, prompted evacuations for nearby residents. Weatherford has about 12,000 residents and is about 70 miles west of Oklahoma City. That's going to do it for this week's edition of the Newsletter Podcast. We'll be back next week. Until then, Timmy, over and out.